Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 166, Bear King Mountain's Trial. Flaming Cloud Crow wanted to fight the second round. It was unknown how it felt after fighting with the Muscle Master Hound, but it actually became enthusiastic about fighting. It seemed to enjoy conflict. Well, it was probably enjoying the pleasure of the flaming blade slashing across an object. This crow was gradually becoming abnormal. But in the end, they did not fight. Heavenly King Wu and the others came out. Behind them were large cargo trucks. Well done, you've tortured old Ghost Lu's student in such a short span of time. Heavenly King Wu was very pleased. Su Hao wasn't his student, but his junior, but that didn't stop him from acting cool, right? The others didn't know. Having been trapped and questioned by Su Hao the whole time, he, who was once troubled and even lost a few strands of hair because of this, was very clear about the strength of Su Hao's sprite. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that they could easily dominate Whale Island University. It may even be difficult to find someone among the second-year students who could win against him. No matter whether old Ghost Lu's students were in their first or second year, Su Hao could abuse them. As for third-year students, that was basically impossible. The sprite battle system of third-level students was basically formed, and very few new sprites were cultivated anymore. There were no restrictions on sprite contracts, but for most elite level and master levels, they would only maintain between 3 to 5 sprites. Any more and they would need the help of a professional logistics team. That's Heavenly King Xiang, the Heavenly King who's in charge of guarding this fortress. He has a pretty good relationship with the sprites of Bear King Mountain. Heavenly King Wu pointed. There, that Luhan Panda was brought out from Bear King Mountain. Su Hao looked over. There was no need to mention Heavenly King Xiang's physique. The Luhan Panda following behind it stood upright. Its white and black hair were interwoven, and there was even a huge string of Buddha beads hanging on its neck. Its eyes protruded slightly as it stared forward. It didn't look as cute as an ordinary panda. Instead, it gave off a mighty feeling. Let's go. Heavenly King Xiang stepped forward. At the fortress alloy gate, large cargo vehicles drove out one after another. There were more than 10 of them, forming a convoy as they moved forward on the rugged road. Heavenly King Wu scratched his head. Why don't we go faster? Heavenly King Xiang looked at him, then at his trading puppet. All right, then I'll have to trouble you to do free manual labor. Only the trading puppet drooped its head, looking very tired but had no choice but to work. Lifting up a large truck weighing more than 10 to 20 tons was also somewhat strenuous for a monarch-ranked trading puppet. What's more than a dozen cars were being carried away. But under the control of its psychic power, the trucks still floated up and flew into the distance with a whoosh. This greatly surprised many people who saw monarch-rank psychic element sprites for the first time. Heavenly King Wu was very pleased. He successfully acted cool again. Heavenly King Lu, whose hair was so high it reached the sky, snorted. In terms of destruction, he was definitely stronger than old Ghost Wu. Bear King Mountain wasn't far from the fortress. There was a road in the middle that was wide enough for 3 to 4 cars to drive side by side. On the asphalt road. It was just that due to the destruction of wild sprites all year round, the road wasn't that flat. But after the truck was carried away, the others traveled much faster. They each displayed their abilities and arrived at the foot of the Bear King Mountain in the blink of an eye. There are buildings here. Looking ahead, there was a huge mountain gate standing at the foot of the mountain. The words Bear King Mountain were written on the plaque. Further back was a flight of steps paved with large bluestone, extending straight up. Each step was very high and wide, equivalent to 3 to 4 compartments of ordinary steps. Looking further up, one could vaguely see stone houses and stone halls halfway up the mountain. Su Hao's mouth fell open. Heavenly King Wu patted his shoulder. What are you thinking about? These were all built by our Dragon Nation's infrastructure team for the allies of Bear King Mountain. Su Hao was confused. So it was built by our Dragon Nation's engineers? Thinking about it carefully, it was also very reasonable and logical. No wonder the three words Bear King Mountain were familiar Dragon Nation characters. He still thought. Su Hao sweated. He glanced around and was relieved to find that many people had the same expression as him. It's not that I'm confused. It's just that I'm deliberately looking confused to make myself look less out of place. Yes, that was how it was. At the foot of Bear King Mountain, Heavenly King Xiang's Luhan Panda let out a roar. Woo! The sound spread far and wide, startling many weak wild sprites in the surrounding forest. Before long, bear shadows appeared on the mountain. Tyrant Bear, Luhan Panda, Thunder Roaring, and other bear-type sprites ran down the mountain one after another. There were also many sprites in their growth stage, initial form, or first stage of evolution. They looked at the large cargo trucks and let out cries of anticipation. Sob. Su Hao was rendered speechless. Then, he saw the truck driver open the carriage. Bear sprites lined up and walked forward, skillfully and carefully carrying large boxes from the vehicle. One of the electric bears wanted to pull the door of the coach impatiently, but was immediately slapped away by a thunder roaring with its claw. It rolled far away. Thunder Roaring growled a few more times. After the electric bear got up, it pulled its head and stood to the side obediently. A Luhan Panda walked down from the top of the mountain. Its body was only slightly larger than the other Luhan Pandas, but its eyes had the vicissitudes and intelligence that other sprites didn't have. It slowly walked down the stone steps like an old man and looked at Heavenly King Xiang. Its mouth opened slightly, and actually spoke Dragon Nation language. Human who have come from far away, come with me. On Bear King Mountain. A Thunder Roaring commanded the other bears to open the huge boxes. They took out a lot of Dragon Nation's exclusive ingredients, professional kitchenware, and computers. Especially the keyboards, many were a meter long, and the buttons were also designed to be very big. The corners of Su Hao's mouth twitched after taking a few looks. Then, he looked at those bear sprites who had been assigned to the computers and looked so excited that they couldn't control themselves, with expressions of "Ah, I'm dying" on their faces. He understood. He understood everything. The supplies provided by Dragon Nation to Bear King Mountain were indeed very favored by bears. But wasn't there something wrong? The bear tribe's sprite moved those computers into the hall built with huge rocks. Then, staff members from the team came forward and installed them one by one. Electric lines, internet lines, everything was connected. Butterfly's eyes were shining as it looked at the plug-in and computer. But when it thought about the 10 portable chargers it brought, did that mean that it wouldn't need them anymore? But where did the electricity come from? Gurgle. Su Hao's gaze swept across the hall. Finally, he saw a few machines in a corner. He guessed that they should be generating devices. 2 Thunder Roarings stood at the side, their palms emitting piercing light from land mines, transmitting it to the few generating devices. He saw that the number of electricity storage grids shown on the display was gradually increasing. Su Hao no longer complained. That was probably the bear-powered generator. While they were busy, that special Luhan Panda walked over. It looked at Heavenly King Xiang and asked, "How many of you want to participate?" "There are a total of 8 people." Heavenly King Xiang counted and said. Su Hao looked over. He, Wu Hang, and the other 4 were considered juniors. Some were around his age, while others were younger than him. The other 2 were master-level sprite trainers, looking to be in their 30s or 40s. They also wanted to contract the sprites of Bear King Mountain. The Luhan Panda looked at the 8 of them and said, "As long as you pass the trial, you will have a chance to contract the bear cubs here. The trial is divided into 2 parts, one determines ability, the second is to get the approval of our Bear King Mountain sprite." Chapter 167, Votes Polling Segment. The so-called abilities aren't tough. The Luhan Panda brought them to the other side of the platform on the mountainside, in front of a cliff. There were chains here, stretching across the cliff and embedded into the mountain wall opposite. Looking down, it seemed bottomless. Strong winds howled, and lightning appeared in the surroundings from time to time. However, there were also many bear tribe sprites who were training on the chains. Playing, grabbing onto the chains like they were swinging on a swing. It made people sweat involuntarily. The first part of the trial is for you to walk along the metal chain to the opposite side before walking back. Sprites can help, but you have to step on metal chains. You are not allowed to ride sprites that can fly. The Luhan panda paused and looked at the 8 people. Which one of you will start first? Of course, Su Hao was a little scared. It wasn't a question of whether he would fall to his death, but it looked scary. Among the 8, the youngest, probably only 16 or 17 years old, looked at the cliff and the violent wind and thunder that appeared from time to time, and was about to burst into tears. The young lady's senior, a female soon-to-be Heavenly King, comforted her. Don't worry, you won't die. I mean you won't fall. I'll go first. A middle-aged master-level man stepped out. He walked in front of an unmanned, unbared chain. He said to his sprite, a bursting flame bat, protect me. As he spoke, he stepped onto the chain. The middle-aged man walked on it like it was flat ground. The bursting flame bat only blocked some thunderbolts that had suddenly appeared. In less than 2 minutes, this master-level person walked back and forth. The other master-level stepped forward right after. Relying on his strong physique after the feedback, as well as the reflexes and balance abilities he had gained from training, he made a simple round trip. After all, at master level, his mental fortitude was much stronger than juniors like Su Hao. Let me do it. Su Hao had just taken a step forward when Wu Hang ran up quickly. He snatched the 3rd spot. Su Hao shrugged. Why was he in such a hurry? Wu Hang's steel bone dragon lizard was completely useless. His flaming phoenix butterfly held onto his collar and helped him maintain his balance with great difficulty. He also had to pay attention to the wind and thunder around him. He walked carefully for 5 to 6 minutes before returning. Su Hao noticed that the back of his clothes was completely wet. Wu Hang even raised his chin at him. You have a strong desire to win, why bother? Su Hao wanted to comment that he didn't even see how many flying sprites he had. His gaze swept across Butterfly, Dazed Crow, and Dumb Unicorn. They all knew how to fly. They all had protective abilities. So, just the 2 of you. Su Hao greeted Butterfly and Dazed Crow. Water Unicorn Beast. Nay. Nay. It called out urgently. Su Hao was unmoved. This dumb unicorn was clearly especially easy to get carried away, and it clearly didn't have any idea in its heart. He would feel too insecure if he brought it along. No way. Su Hao took a few steps forward and stepped on the chain. It swayed. He was confident. He definitely couldn't stand steadily. Li Songting probably could. But he wasn't afraid. He walked straight forward. Butterfly's psychic power grabbed him from both sides, making him maintain his balance and walk forward. Flaming Cloud Crow flew above him. Its wings spread out and extended continuously. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a pair of huge wings 7 to 8 meters long, protecting him from both sides. There was also Reverie Butterfly's psychic shield as the second layer of protection. He felt very safe. But it was rather much. Su Hao raised his head slightly and didn't look at the chain under his feet. In any case, Reverie Butterfly had fixed his direction, so he didn't deviate from it. So he walked faster and faster, and walked back and forth in 2 to 3 minutes. He walked with maximum comfort. He walked out with a sense of joy. After walking out, he still hadn't had enough. Heavenly King Wu patted Heavenly King Lu very proudly. Look, that's my junior. He's not your disciple. But he was also taught by me, he's stronger than the students you taught. Heavenly King Lu, son of AB*TCH. He simply turned away. The remaining 4 tried one after another, completing the ability assessment safely. The most thrilling one was the 16-year-old girl. She only had one sprite, entry-level Wind Sparrow. The Wind Sparrow wasn't big nor strong. After spending a lot of effort in addition to the little girl's own hard work, she finally finished climbing the chain. But those with experience knew that the first round of the trial had a greater symbolic meaning. The difficult part of the trial was how to gain the approval of the Bear King Mountain Sprites. The Luhan Panda held a wooden cane, paused, and said, "You have 1 day to move around halfway up the mountain. You can use your charm, strength, or other methods. There are no restrictions, as long as you can get the approval of other sprites. Tomorrow, afternoon, I will gather the other sprites to vote. As long as you can get more than 20 votes, it will be considered a success. You can look for bear cubs to contract yourself." The Luhan Panda added, "Well, every sprite only has 1 vote. It can choose not to vote, but not vote more than once." After it finished speaking, it told Heavenly King Xiang and the others to leave. Only Su Hao and the other 7 competitors were left. Wu Hang looked over, as if saying, "I will win this round." Su Hao shrugged. He was a professional when it came to relationships with sprites. If 1 meal wasn't enough, he would let them have 2 meals. If 2 meals weren't enough, he would add more ingredients. He had also observed just now that the sprites of Bear King Mountain were all foodies. Why else would most of the supplies be related to food? Well, fortunately, I had foresight. He looked at the water unicorn beast. After the battle, it hung its luggage on it again. He called out to the water unicorn beast and walked towards the stone hall, thinking about which jade powder set meal to use. At the same time, the others each moved as well. Gurgle. Butterfly flew above his head and asked if it could move freely on its own. Gurgle. It added that could help with the canvassing. Su Hao thought about it. Butterfly was indeed a cultural butterfly. He felt relieved and agreed. Gurgle. The butterfly flapped its wings and flew away briskly. On Bear King Mountain, all the computers were installed in the hall. There were large, medium, and small models, arranged in rows, like an internet cafe. At this moment, a tyrant bear was giving instructions to the little cubs. It roared. "Easy. Do you know how expensive a computer is? Whoever breaks the keyboard, get lost." It spoke in sprite language, its voice making the air buzz. Butterfly flew a little further away and looked around. The bear tribe sprites were excited and carefully controlled their mouse and keyboard. They fought in front of the computer. Seeing this scene, Butterfly felt like it had returned home. It felt very comfortable. It flew and flew behind an electric bear. On the screen was a game popular in Dragon Nation, or rather, it was very popular all over the world. 5v5 battle game. The name was League of Sprite Trainers. Sprite trainers chose sprites to develop, match, and team battle. The sprite controlled by the electric bear was also an electric bear. After it destroyed a wave of wild sprites, it finally reached level 12. The sprite on the screen was accompanied by a roar. Woo! The electric bear evolved into thunder roaring, and its whole body became much larger. Circles of thunder arcs surrounded it, and there was even a striking lightning mark on its chest. The electric bear was excited. Its paw kept manipulating the special mouse and keyboard. But suddenly, a punching king kangaroo darted out from the bushes. A combination of skills blasted thunder roaring into the sky and caused it to land heavily. The whole screen instantly turned black and white. The electric bear, which was controlling its character, was stunned. Lightning flashed in his eyes. It let out a roar, raised its bear paw and was about to slap down angrily. It paused halfway. Its logic told it that it couldn't. But it also died in the hands of the computer. The electric bear felt wronged and angry, but had nowhere to vent. Butterfly looked at it and sighed. How embarrassing! It landed in front of the computer and pushed the lightning bear away with psychic power. Gurgle. Look at me. Chapter 168, Different Methods. The electric bear was stunned. Then angry. I'm already in such a miserable state, why are there still sprites snatching my computer? Woo-hoo-hoo, it roared. Reverie Butterfly didn't even take a look and only called out a few times. Gurgle. Gurgle, gurgle. Do you know item build? Do you know lane techniques? Do you know when to cast a skill? Do you know how to work with your teammates and ambush them? Yes. Butterfly asked the 5 soul questions. The electric bear replied that it couldn't. The electric bear fell into deep thought. At this moment, Butterfly had already controlled its revived character and returned to the online game. Its little hand was too short, and it was still a little difficult to touch the medium-sized keyboard, but the mouse was still controlled with psychic power. But 2 minutes later, Electric Bear 025 completed the double kill. The Electric Bear 025 has already gone berserk. Lightning Bear 025 has already surpassed God level. A few minutes later, Butterfly put down the mouse without any sense of accomplishment. What was that opponent on the other side? It was a bot. What was the point of torturing a bot? It felt that this electric bear's standard was a little low, and wanted to fly to other places to see if there were any higher level matches. Roar, roar. Gurgle. Roar. The lightning bear let out a cry and ran away. A moment later, it came over with a lot of snacks. Roar. Gurgle. For me. Butterfly felt that the bears here were very warm and hospitable, so it sat down to help this electric bear score. Bear King Mountain's internet was a regional network. It didn't have as many players as Dragon Nation, but these bears were full of energy and had a high number of online users. There were still a few rounds or more that could be played. Gurgle. It glanced. It used the electric bear account to start the game. An hour later, behind the electric bear's seat was a circle of bears surrounding. There was Tyrant Bear, Thunder Roaring, Lohan Panda. As a junior, the electric bear was pushed to the periphery. And because it wasn't in its final form, it was short, so it was blocked by a circle of big bears and couldn't see anything. It was both aggrieved and pitiful. It was clearly the one who was there first. Sob. At this moment, those surrounding Butterfly. A bear that asked for advice on techniques. A bear that wanted to play together. There was a bear acting cute. Butterfly pushed it away with its psychic power. I'm the cutest, gurgle. At the same time, the 8 contestants started to move. The master-level sprite trainer named Wang Wu swept his gaze across the hall and saw bear tribe sprites sitting in front of computers. If you want to contract a sprite on Bear King Mountain, the second stage is the most difficult. Find a sprite contract after completing. There are so many bear cubs on Bear King Mountain, I can always abduct one. He pondered. Seeing how focused the bears were, he felt a little troubled. To canvass for votes, one had to gain favorability from the bear tribe's sprites. Even though he didn't like to play games, he knew clearly. Interrupting others when they were playing games would certainly cause him hatred. There was no need to mention any good feelings. The main hall is where most of the bear tribe sprites were gathered, but it's actually a trap. If I spend a lot of time here, it's very likely to lead to eventual failure. As a master-level sprite trainer, Wang Wu was very bold. Without any hesitation, he abandoned the most attractive hall and walked towards other areas. As long as I can get 20 votes, I can bring the bear cub home. I will succeed. Another area in the hall. After Wu Hang walked around, he quickly had an idea. As a formal university student, he definitely had mastered gaming skills. His standard was pretty good. Especially after the sprite's feedback, his body got better by the day. He was full of energy and his hand speed was bursting. If not for the limited time he had to play games, Wu Hang felt that it wouldn't be difficult for him to fight the Heavenly King of the League of Sprite Trainers. I'm also playing in the League of Sprite Trainers. It's very easy to get close to this group of bears. Then, I'll use my gaming skills to conquer them. The so-called second stage of the trial isn't that difficult after all. A confident smile appeared on his face. Then, he thought of Su Hao. As one of the most outstanding university students, he didn't think that Su Hao couldn't pass this round. But, as long as I get more votes than him, I'll win. Wu Hang aimed for an empty position after the muscle bear had ended its game. He stepped forward and patted it. Roar! His flaming phoenix butterfly flew over to communicate and translate. A moment later. I see. Help you defeat the opponent? Easy. Wu Hang flipped through the battle results. In the battle just now, there were 2 losses. From the data, he discovered that a relatively strong bear had sent the opposing team flying. Pay more attention to this character called Electric Bear 025. As long as I restrict it, it's safe. Now, it's time to let the sprites of Bear King Mountain experience the strength of Fiery Bird University's top student. Wu Hang swiftly chose sprites and started the battle. 3 minutes later. A mistake, just a mistake. He wiped the sweat off his forehead. I was careless. I'm going to be serious next. 5 minutes later. Wu Hang looked at the 0/2/0 and his fingers trembled slightly. 10 minutes later. His lips were dry as he leaned forward. His eyes were wide open as he stared intently at the grey screen. 15 minutes later. He slumped back in his chair with a dejected look. He muttered to himself, impossible, impossible, how can this be? The muscle bear shook its head in disappointment. Weak. He was clearly at the same level as itself, both being abused, yet he looked like he was full of confidence. Such a person actually wanted a vote? Humans. Roar. It picked Wu Hang up. The general meaning was for him to go somewhere else. If you're weak, don't occupy computers anymore. At the same time, in front of the computer in another area, Reverie Butterfly dispersed its psychic power reluctantly. Gurgle. It felt that the opponent just now was pretty good. The original bear must have called for help. It finally had a bit of fun. Gurgle. It continued to teach the bear sprites game techniques. At the halfway point of Bear King Mountain, it could generally be divided into internet cafes, residential areas, cultivation areas, and cooking areas. The internet cafe area was where most of the sprites of the bear tribe were, but the 8 contestants either felt that the internet-addicted bear wasn't easy to deal with, or, their gaming experience was completely negative, and they fell into a confused state of who am I, where am I, did I just play the game? They all left the internet cafe area. Su Hao didn't go there from the start. Although my gaming standard is also very high, games and whatnot are the worst plans. We don't need them. As the saying goes, to conquer a sprite, you have to conquer its stomach first. My name, Little Manager Su, will definitely resound throughout the whole Bear King Mountain. Su Hao walked towards the cooking area. He saw one stove after another. A few tyrant bears, wearing white aprons, were standing in front of the stoves, fiddling with something. One of them was even wearing a tall white hat. It noticed Su Hao, roared at the other tyrant bears, and turned to look. Human, do you want votes? I've put all the ingredients there. If you want the tickets, it'll depend on your ability. Chapter 169, The Final Voting. It was actually a sprite that could speak human language. Apart from the Luhan Panda, the tyrant bear in front of him was the second sprite that Su Hao had seen that could speak human language. He had never seen Senior Wu's trading puppet speak before. Perhaps the puppet itself doesn't know how to speak. Su Hao opened the interface and took a look. The tyrant bear in front of him was indeed monarch rank. He couldn't see anything more specific. Many messages were a series of. Su Hao looked towards the direction Tyrant Bear was pointing towards. It was the food storage area. There was spiritual jade, some strange vegetables and fruits, and a lot of fresh meat. Su Hao saw a bunch of thigh meat thicker than his waist. In the beginning, he thought it was sprite meat. In his mind, the demonic aura of Bear King Mountain filled the air, and the bears revealed their ferocious big mouths and fangs. But thinking about it, that wasn't the case. The curriculum of Introduction to the New World stated that in the New World, there were also ordinary creatures apart from sprites. With plants, there would naturally be animals. In the New World environment, there were many ferocious beasts that were even more ferocious than tigers and lions. But no matter how ferocious a beast was, it was still trash compared to sprites. Usually, sprites do not need to consume meat. The breeding, growth, and living environment of sprites were practically two unrelated circles compared to ordinary creatures. It was only until the chefs of Dragon Nation showed the Bear King Mountain sprites to a whole new world. After walking around the place where the ingredients were placed, Su Hao finally saw some familiar bottles and cans. For example, pepper sauce, sesame sauce, black pepper, cumin powder, and so on. These were all seasonings provided by Dragon Nation. Su Hao was initially worried that he had not brought sufficient items. Now, he was relieved. Everything he had brought was here. Everything he hadn't brought was here too. Very good, the goal is to conquer the stomachs of dozens of sprites. In the food ingredient area, Su Hao also saw other candidates. One of them was one of the master levels. His moves showed his experience, and he seemed to be able to recognize a lot of the strange ingredients. He looked like a part-time chef. Su Hao labeled him as a strong competitor. The other person was also older than him. He was a young man, and probably had already graduated from university. He was still an official sprite cultivator. The young man's gaze was always on the spiritual jade, but when he looked at the ingredients, he seemed very hesitant. Clearly, he could not identify much of them. Master-level sprite trainer Chen Ming saw it and was relieved. The three of us are the most direct competitors. But they are young after all, their understanding of the new world is far inferior to mine. Especially. He looked at Su Hao. He had heard about how outstanding this young man was. But he was just a first year, it was very likely that he had never explored the wild in the new world. How would he know to differentiate between the weird ingredients? Relying on spiritual jades? The jade powder set meal also required the addition of other ingredients. In other aspects, everyone came to the cooking area. Who wasn't a sprite cultivator? He brushed away their threats and looked at the ingredients in front of him, taking them at a steady pace. A complete train of thought had already formed in Chen Ming's mind. He reached out his hand. Suddenly, he paused and turned his peripheral vision to the side. When he saw the student named Su Hao, who had quickly picked up various ingredients and spiritual jades. Is he fooling around? No, wait. He saw Su Hao pick a few ingredients on the left, then walk to the right, running towards a certain ingredient with great purpose. He did not seem to be picking at random. These ingredients indeed seem to be very compatible. Impossible, has he come into contact with these ingredients before? Even if he has, can he be like me, with more than 10 years of experience? Su Hao certainly didn't. He took a few, then glanced at the interface. Thanks to the high standards of ingredients provided by Bear King Mountain, they could appear on the interface. 7-colored vine fruit, plucked from the 7-colored vine. Its attributes are respectively gold, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and thunder fruits. Sprites will be greatly benefited after consuming it. Its effect is even better when paired with XXX, as below. Remarks: after the 7-colored vine bears 7 fruits, it withers and dies. Red sunflower, it can only be picked at noon when the sun is at its brightest. After being mixed with special methods, it can increase the temperature of sprite flames. It can be eaten multiple times. Su Hao was hungry for them. The sight of it made him drool. Not every ingredient could be displayed on the interface. He didn't want those that were of too low quality. If he did not understand, he would just not take them. After selecting, he borrowed the complete facilities of Bear King Mountain and started to fiddle around. The chef Tyrant Bear, who could only speak human language, kept nodding when it saw him. When Chen Ming and the other nameless boy noticed, the pressure on them increased. What kind of monster was he? While the 8 competitors were using their own methods, in the living room of Bear King Mountain, bears walked over with plates filled with fruit, nuts and vintage wine. Some big bosses who came to Bear King Mountain for the first time took a few looks. They felt that no matter from which angle they looked at it, there was a strong sense of familiarity. Oh! When they thought about it, the scene in front of them seemed to be somewhat similar to some film and television series. The way these bears treated their guests looked. It was also learned from some movies in Dragon Nation. The computer provided by Dragon Nation to Bear King Mountain naturally contained countless movies, cartoons, and novels, apart from games. Certainly. There were no textbooks, history books, or related videos. Everything stored in the computer was mainly for entertainment. Who do you think will come first? Heavenly King Wu said with a smile as he looked at Heavenly King Lu, whose hair was standing on end. Heavenly King Lu's face darkened. He snorted. Who doesn't know what you're thinking? But your little junior might not be able to get first place. In my opinion, the one with the most votes should be Chen Ming. Heavenly King Wu thought about it and surprisingly didn't retort. He didn't really think that Su Hao could win the highest vote either. In terms of experience and methods, Chen Ming, who was a generation older, was much richer than Su Hao. But as long as he was stronger than old Ghost Lu's student, crush him. That would make Heavenly King Wu very pleased. Well, he still has to try my best to get high votes. There was an unwritten rule when searching for sprite contracts in the future. When the two of them took a fancy to a sprite at the same time, who had the highest vote and who had the priority to seduce, the right to try. From afternoon, till night. Then through the night. Su Hao used the style set meal he created himself to gain a lot of good reviews from bear sprites. With so many bears enjoying it, even if only a third or a quarter of them vote, I can still get 20 votes. Master-level sprite trainer Chen Ming also gained a lot of praise after the bear sprites tasted the delicacies cooked by him. I've underestimated that young man Su Hao, but with food and other aspects, my vote count definitely won't be low. In the Thunder Prison cultivation area, Wang Wu, a master-level sprite trainer with the purple lightning wings, had very rich experience in how Thunder Element sprites used thunder to cultivate. He was giving pointers to some rolling beasts and electric bears. What a pity! It's very difficult to achieve immediate results in a day of cultivation. Seriously, the bear sprites of Bear King Mountain are either addicted to delicacies or computers. Damn it, I wonder if I can get 20 votes. Fiery Bird students will never admit defeat. Wu Hang had already given up on the Union of Sprite Trainers game. Starting from if it's a sprite, then go up to 100 levels, he finally attracted some bear types. 20 votes, I must get it. At this moment, Butterfly was no longer playing games with the bear sprites. Because its name was gradually spreading. Every bear wanted to team up with it. Butterfly thought for a while and felt that there was no point in torturing noobs, so it went back to its old profession. Butterfly's class is starting. They had already changed places and arrived at a multimedia classroom. Butterfly danced in midair as the computer connected to the huge projector screen behind. He looked down. Tyrant bears, thunder roarings, and Luhan pandas sat in rows. In order to ensure that all the sprites could see, Butterfly even let the shorter sprites sit in the front and the taller ones in the back. It then started to lecture. It wasn't just about the Union of Sprite Trainers game, but also about other things. For example, a game called Cut Me Down If You're a Bear. He also recommended a lot of movies, cartoons, and novels to his friends from the bear tribe. For example, the book it had written. Gurgle. It was a little regretful. Bear King Mountain's internet was a regional network. The novels they read were also pirated novels, so they couldn't increase its income. Gurgle. It pondered, but the lecture didn't stop. It went on until the next day. In the middle, it played a few games with its newly gained fans. Many bear tribe sprites who were originally addicted to delicacies or stayed in the cultivation area also joined in when they heard the news. Some had bright eyes and looked like they were fanboying. Some were impressed by its skills and wanted to cozy up to it so they could play together. His fans kept increasing in numbers. Finally, it was noon the next day. Many heavenly kings and soon-to-be heavenly kings came to the square in front of the hall. The Luhan Panda elder stepped forward, his mouth slightly agape. Woo! The sound spread far and wide. Not long after, Bear Tribe sprites walked out of the Internet Cafe's main hall or other buildings. They participated in only one voting event per year. Su Hao and the other 8 contestants had also done what they needed to do. They had long arrived here to wait for the final result. Puff! At this moment, Reverie Butterfly flew over and landed on his head. Su Hao hadn't seen it for a day. He was just about to ask something when the Luhan Panda elder spoke. Chapter 170, It must be because of my unparalleled charm. The Luhan Panda elder spoke human language. It looked at the group of Bear King Mountain sprites and said, "You have 5 minutes to consider. Then, on the wooden board, mark out the human you have agreed on." Most sprites, of course, couldn't read or count. But there was a huge wooden board behind Su Hao, on which circle marks were drawn with bear claws. It represented him. Some contestants had a line behind them, while others had an X. It made Su Hao shake his head slightly. The culture level of Bear King Mountain sprites seemed very limited. In comparison, even the dazed crow and the dumb unicorn with limited literacy were more cultured than those silly bears. They were not illiterate to the extent that they couldn't count. Indeed, it's a very correct choice on my part to arrange 9 years of basic education for sprites. The Luhan Panda elder roared a bunch of things. You can only draw one pattern. It's useless to draw 2. You can also choose not to draw. Alright, now each bear will receive the wooden board. A few Luhan pandas carried a pile of wooden planks the size of half a door and handed them to the bears who were preparing to participate in the voting. Compared to the bears present, the number of wooden boards prepared seemed a little less. The Luhan Panda elder could tell. With its rich experience and brain speed, it quickly counted the bears and wooden boards present and said, "Those who only want to watch and don't want to vote, stand aside. Don't get the wooden boards." But there were still not many bears who went to the side to watch the show. The Luhan Panda elder found it strange. In the past years, it's already considered a lot if there were 100 bears. It wasn't necessary to participate in the voting segment. Many bears ignored it completely. Those who were playing games continued to play games, those who were fiddling with food continued to fiddle with food. Some were so engrossed that they didn't even know that humans had arrived. But why are there so many bears here today? The Luhan Panda elder was puzzled. It didn't even have enough wooden planks prepared. It could only let the other bears run down the mountain and chop a few large trees to transport them up. On the mountain? Those couldn't be slashed. If they were slashed, it would become Bald King Mountain. Their Bear King Mountain lineage also knew how to protect their environment. 10 minutes passed. Those who received the wooden boards, those who didn't, a group of bears muttered and looked at the contestants from time to time. Su Hao felt like they were looking at him. He couldn't help but touch his chin and think. I'm indeed the most handsome boy in the crowd. During the break, he poked Reverie Butterfly again and asked about the canvassing. Gurgle. What, you said that not only did you pull votes, you even got the other bears to help pull votes. Gurgle. You even said that you've gotten your hands on a bunch of Fang girls again. Gurgle. It nodded, looking like it wanted him to quickly praise itself. But Su Hao didn't think so. Where was this? It was Bear King Mountain. Most bears were relatively naive, but those big boss bears that had lived for hundreds or thousands of years were not that simple. Even the style sprite delicacies that he had made himself had only received the approval of the tyrant bear chef. With Big Boss Xiong in front, many bear tribe sprites also had extraordinary levels. How could they be convinced by the little rascal? Never mind, 20 votes are definitely enough anyway. It's time to consider which sprite to choose. Su Hao sank into deep thought. He started to use the interface to check the information of the sprites one by one. Unfortunately, there were too many sprites, and their aptitudes weren't written on the surface like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, purple or SSSE. He needed to look carefully, and it was a little confusing. Finally, the Luhan pandas on the side used their claws to chop out wooden planks and distributed them. The elder panda paused and said, "Start marking the humans you acknowledge, then hand over the wooden board." A group of bear tribe sprites of all sizes were using their claws to scratch. A moment later, the Luhan panda kept the wooden planks and piled them in front of elder panda. The Luhan panda elder looked at Heavenly King Xiong and the others. "We're starting to tabulate the data. Mr. Xiong, please be the notary." The muscular Heavenly King Xiong nodded and walked forward. He was familiar with the segment. He knew that he had to help to tabulate the data so as to prevent the Bear King Mountain sprites from making mistakes in their calculation. Su Hao and the other contestants stood on the other side. Wu Hang looked at him, unwilling to admit defeat. The 16-year-old girl looked a little nervous and not that confident. Similarly, there were also 3 to 4 others. They didn't hook in enough bears. Looking at the Luhan panda elder on the other side, they swallowed nervously. Finally, the Luhan panda elder picked up the first plank, turned to look at the 8 contestants, and compared the pattern. It said, "Su Hao 1 vote." It picked up the second piece and glanced at it. "Su Hao 2 votes." Then, it picked up the third piece. "Su Hao 3 votes." Wu Hang was nervous. He looked at the bears frequently. He really wanted to know whether those bears who played If It's a Sprite, then go up 100 levels with him had voted for him. Unfortunately, there were too many bear sprites, and they looked similar, so he couldn't recognize them. At this moment, Luhan Panda Elder, who had picked up the 4th plank, finally paused and looked towards the contestants. It seemed to be comparing the pattern. "It's someone else's vote, right?" Many people thought so. Then, he saw Luhan Panda Elder show Heavenly King Xiong the wooden board. Heavenly King Xiong also shook his head. Elder Panda shouted, "Who drew it? What a mess, invalid vote." Wu Hang. Pieces of wood were tabulated. Su Hao's vote count rose from 1 digit to 2 digits, then to 3 digits. The other contestants were stunned. Especially Wu Hang and Chen Ming. Their chances were very high. Those bears vowed solemnly and said that they would vote for them. In the end, what was the result? Su Hao had more than 100 votes. 3 votes for Wu Hang. Chen Ming got 4 votes. Why did it turn out to be like this? They were all a bunch of liar bears. The Heavenly Kings and soon-to-be Heavenly Kings were also a little confused. Heavenly King Xiong was the same. They compared it over and over again and realized that the tabulation was indeed correct. Su Hao's pattern wasn't the easiest to draw either. Then why was there such a huge difference? Even Heavenly King Wu couldn't understand. He believed that he already knew Su Hao very well, but at this moment, he still felt that there was a mysterious veil covering his little junior. It was simply awesome. Heavenly King Wu was very satisfied. He didn't care so much, as long as it was awesome. At this moment, Su Hao found it a little difficult to understand. There should only be 70 to 80 bears that I've fed before, right? I am meeting many bears for the first time. Su Hao thought for a moment. He came to a conclusion. These bears must have been attracted by my irresistible charm. After all, I'm so handsome. Even if my charm transcends species, it's also reasonable and logical. Besides, those bears kept looking over. The case was solved. Gurgle. Butterfly slowly typed out a question mark and grabbed his hair. It was only then that Su Hao realized that he was carrying a butterfly. His mind was stuck for a moment before he suddenly reacted. Wait. No way. His eyes moved up. He glanced at Reverie Butterfly, then at the bears in the distance. After staring straight for a while, he came to a conclusion that he found somewhat unacceptable. Those bears actually were looking at Reverie Butterfly. But butterflies and bears aren't the same species, right? Could it be that cuteness is more advantageous than handsomeness? It may also be because the little rascal is a sprite. Gurgle. Butterfly called out unhappily. It emphasized that it relied on techniques. No need to act cute, coo. The voting results were unacceptable to many. Su Hao, 349 votes. The others, added up to only 20-odd votes. Why was it so little? Su Hao had already solved the case. The key was the 10 minutes before the vote. Most of the fanboys and girls bears directly assimilated the small number of bears that originally intended to vote for others. Anyway, it was just a vote. They had only interacted with humans for a day. Could their relationship be stronger than the brothers and sisters of the bear clan? Of course it was to show off. Wu Hang, Chen Ming, and the others were still confused. A contestant without a name suddenly said, I think I saw it. When his Reverie Butterfly was playing games, there were so many bears surrounding it. With that said, Wu Hang also had an impression of it. At first, he saw a place surrounded by circles of bears, like a wall. At that time, he didn't see what kind of sprites were inside. He didn't think too much about it. Later, when he passed by a large room, he saw an image of many bears sitting in rows. Could it be? He looked over. Chen Ming also looked at Su Hao. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. He was also thinking. A moment later. I see, I understand. He said, making sprite set meals is just Su Hao's smoke screen. His real goal is to cover that sprite. It's very likely. Wu Hang continued, I saw Su Hao's flaming cloud crow and water cloud horse following him, and I was wondering where that Reverie Butterfly went. So it turns out that Reverie Butterfly was the killer move he arranged. Impressive. The others sighed in envy. Among the 8, Su Hao was indeed the one who received the most attention. Many people noticed Su Hao's actions. When Chen Ming was feeding the sprites, he tried his best to avoid Su Hao, but he didn't expect. This junior of yours is indeed extraordinary. Heavenly King Lu sighed and said, he's much stronger than you were back then. Heavenly King Wu. He snorted and said, I've long expected this. In the challenge segment at the beginning of our Whale Island University's school term, Little Su used a similar strategy. Everything that had happened was in his plans. Even if an accident happens, Little Su has countless backup plans to make up for it. As expected of my junior. I won't deny that he's indeed a little stronger than me back then. Heavenly King Xiong kept looking at Su Hao. He has the ability, but he doesn't act rashly. Instead, he pays the smallest price to achieve the highest yield. Cultivate him well. In the future, he will become a pillar of the Union, and even though he won with an overwhelming advantage, he wasn't complacent because of it. He still had that indifferent but confident expression. He's pretty good, I really admire him. The Luhan Panda elder nodded. Be it humans or bears, these big bosses weren't stingy with their praise at all. After Heavenly King Xiong praised, he was troubled again. He looked at the Luhan panda and said, "Elder, look, Su Hao passed the trial, but what about the others?" But there had never been a year where only one person contracted a sprite in the end.